It's always a pleasure to work with Transition Town Port Washington and my good friend Margaret Galbraith, who has helped to organize tonight's event. I want to thank them, and as well as all the other groups that are represented here tonight. To introduce tonight's program, I want you to please give a warm welcome to the Director of Transition Town, Margaret Galbraith.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you to the Port Washington Public Library. This is actually our 10th educational event we've done together, and we love partnering with you, so thank you. And welcome, everyone, and thank you for being extremely persistent for those in the room. And as my dear friend and panelist said, Hilda, she's like, now we know what it's like to be the wildlife, you know, and you're trying to go where you always go for so many thousands of years or hundreds, and then all of a sudden there's a road and there's blocks and all these stuff, and so that was all planned. So anyways, we have an amazing panel lined up for you tonight, so thank you for coming. And as just said, I'm Margaret Galbraith. I'm the president of Transition Town Port Washington. And for those that don't know us, we are a community-driven organization that started in 2019 that educates, advocates, and acts to protect our environment on this peninsula. And one of our most exciting, one of the projects we're most excited about is the Biodiversity Coalition and helping form it. It brings together partners from 9 different organizations that protect, I think it's 7, sorry, we've gone through these numbers a lot, 7 biodiversity areas, and it covers over 500 acres. So that's the vast majority of wilderness in Port Washington. Our coalition goals are to work together to protect, restore, and connect the Port Washington's biodiversity area while promoting environmental education. We have been meeting periodically since the fall of 2023 to share best practices and address challenges. And if you came early and got to go to our tabling event, you met many of our partners tonight and got to learn about the wonderful work they are doing. We have, our coalition is expanding, and I want to introduce those that are part of our coalition. So if you could please stand up. Kim and John Kaiserman from the Baxter's Pond Foundation. Mike Vitti from Climb, Concerned Long Island Mountain Bikers. Jean Henning from the Nassau Museum of Art. Raju Rajan from Rewild Long Island. Jeremiah Bosgang from Sands Point Preserve. Hildur Palsdottir from the Science Museum of Long Island. Agnes Kualina from the Unitarian Universalist Congregation at Shelter Rock Road. We also partnered with Lynn Johnson, who from P.W. Green, who sadly passed away recently. And Lynn was an inspiration to all of us, and he will be very much missed. Lynn made a lasting impact on the conservation of many of our natural spaces that we now enjoy today in Port Washington, so we have him to thank. But when we first started talking to Lynn, one thing he said to us very excitedly, said, I've been working in Port Washington for decades, and this is the most cooperation I've ever seen between environmental organizations. So indeed, we hope that this coalition can serve as a new model of collaboration and growth as we work together to protect this beautiful peninsula. So what is biodiversity and why does it matter? Biodiversity isn't just about saving animals. It's what keeps our world livable. Think about it. Healthy forests clean our air, bees and other pollinators put food on our tables, and wetlands filter our water while buffering floods. Without diverse ecosystems, we'd lose medicines, stable crops, and even natural shields against storms and diseases. In short, protecting nature means safeguarding our own well-being and our very survival. Plus, who doesn't love hiking through beautiful forests? I know I do. Each of our key biodiversity areas is unique, with diverse habitats and species and equally unique partners. One of our goals tonight is to learn what we have in common to inform collective action as a coalition and as our greater community. Tonight, we're fortunate to hear from both the scientists who study these complex ecosystems and the dedicated local stewards who work hands-on to protect them every day. Before we get started on our panel discussion tonight, I would like to invite Transition Town Port Washington Board member David Jakim to give us an overview of the biodiversity on the Port Washington Peninsula. David Jakim is a biologist with a master's in environmental geoscience and a master's in environmental science education. For over 15 years, David has mapped habitats and conducted wildlife surveys across the Port Washington Peninsula to inform conservation and land use planning. From 2013 to 2017, he led the Committee to Protect and Preserve the Hempstead Harbor Woods, forging partnerships between community groups and local legislators to secure the protection of this 140-acre habitat. From 2017 through 2019, David founded and directed Rewild Port Washington and then Rewild Long Island, a nonprofit focused on protecting, restoring, and creating new habitats. He also launched the Port Washington Monarch Butterfly Alliance as the educational wing of Rewild. In 2022, with support from myself and Transition Town Port Washington, David helped unite the Port Washington Coalition for Biodiversity under a shared vision, a community where biodiversity is protected and environmental education thrives. Welcome, David.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. As Margaret said, well, it's an honor for me to represent Transition Town, to represent our diverse coalition, and also to present some of the greatest joys and explorations of my life, and really the culmination of what's come together as a community, and to focus on biodiversity. This is an issue that's not frequently discussed. However, it does unite us all as a peninsula. Not just us, but in particular, Transition Town. One of our goals, well, we are a global organization of different local towns working together on key environmental issues. With that, I'd like to start to invite you to the wonder, the curiosity, and to the excitement about the natural world, and hopefully to bring you out there, you and your children. So I'd like to invite you to where everything first started, to where my life started, which was tracing streams in Central Park, thanks to my mother, every day, building dams in the Ramble. And these streams led me through my college career, mapping unknown habitats, wilderness areas, and observing them, studying them, and most critically, watching them get destroyed. And that is one thing that really galvanizes environmental activism, concern for biodiversity. It's watching places you love get destroyed. This is something we'll be discussing around Port Washington. Here we are in the really the second stream I followed in my career, the Hempstead Harbor Woods. As Margaret mentioned, it's one of our most important biodiversity areas on the peninsula. In 2022, we gave a presentation on the Hempstead Harbor Woods, our least known treasure. It was the most watched presentation ever given by the library with over 600 views, and it's on YouTube. I highly recommend that you take a look at it. This is part of our collective research we've been working on for now 15 years to better understand our natural world so we can inform conservation and also bring people out to educate about our most crucial gems. So speaking of our most crucial gems, we're looking at biodiversity. So biodiversity is the genetic differences, the definition, between populations of a species, to the diversity of species in a habitat, and to the diversity of biological communities that habitats provide. So the start of a biodiversity assessment, to understand biodiversity on the peninsula, starts with a map, remote sensing, GIS, and then going out there into the field to examine what's there, what's found. So this map here, as you can see in the legend, is exemplary of the diverse habitats in the Hempstead Harbor Woods. It has 100 acres of forests, which Mike Vitti will be discussing. Mike Vitti, by the way, I forgot to mention you. He's the president of Concern Land Mountain Bikers, who oversees the conservation, stewardship, and also the use of the site, and adopted it when it was protected in 2017, and is still working on protecting it. Now, these images display some of the diverse animals. There's a fox den here. I think we have 3 fox dens here in Port Washington. That includes the Hempstead Harbor Woods, Sands Point Preserve, and also Leeds Pond Preserve. And all these are going to be represented today. Some of these animals connect us, like the fox. Some of these animals are disconnected, like the box turtle. It's not able to move across the island as it might need to. Because our habitats, our environment, the threats to biodiversity are growing, and our habitats are fragmented. Protecting what little we have left, especially identifying those places that are of the highest quality, which means predominantly native species, great diversity of species, intact hydrological system and wetlands, and the ecosystem services. That's the highlight of what we all have to share, is the areas we steward and the gems that live within them. This is a map that depicts each of our biodiversity areas, and there is a larger map, if you'd like to look at afterward, which displays the, all of these different habitats. And I'd like to just share a few photographs of each one as an invitation for exploration. These are the exposés of our most iconic, beautiful, interesting photographs that we've collected over the decades. The Guggenheim Preserve is where I'd like to start. The PW Green has been stewarding the Guggenheim Preserve since 2000. PW Green is actually just ending. As Lynn Johnson recently passed away, a member of our coalition, and in his legacy, we are still working to protect it. Rewild Long Island is stepping up to help with that. This place is important because it's our largest meadow of 9 acres. On any summer's day, you're likely to see 4 or 5 monarch butterflies flying amongst the milkweed, which is represented in orange in the upper left. And educational programs for children have been conducted there, and I've been working there with them for many years. Sands Point Preserve's habitats. So many of you are familiar with Sands Point Preserve. Raise your hand if you are. Okay, great. So Sands Point Preserve is the northern portion of the peninsula's largest forest. I believe it's 140 acres. Jeremiah can correct me if I'm wrong. It supports over 240 bird species that have been identified. This is important because New York State has about 450 bird species. 48% of them are in decline. These bird species need interior forest habitats and high quality habitats to sustain themselves. They're really living on the edge. I'd like to point out that the actions we take now to protect our habitats have a magnified exponential effect on what the future of our peninsula is going to look like in terms of biodiversity and the species we love. You can see the maritime bluffs in the lower hand side of the screen. Jeremiah will be speaking to that in particular, as well as the constructed pond on the upper right and a rewild garden on the lower right. The Unitarian Universalist Church at Shelter Rock has one of the most important forest habitats in Nassau County. It's a white oak tulip tree forest predominantly that Greentree and Stephen Peralt have been studying extensively for years now. The trees of white oak are 3.5 feet in diameter. You can Google how old that makes them later. And embedded within this system of white oak tulip tree forest and some swamps are these vernal pools that are the sole habitats that support our colorful, charismatic mole salamanders of different species. That's the yellow-spotted salamander. And also ephemeral woodland flowers that pop up in the spring. Oh, I want to mention they're doing a large-scale restoration of 50 or more acres of the site. Perhaps the most, actually, it is the most intensive, also financially expensive undertaking in our area to protect a forest habitat, I believe, in history. On our peninsula, that is. Baxter's Pond. So Baxter's Pond Foundation is represented by Kim and John Kaiserman that are here. And these are just a few images. On the upper left-hand corner, you see an overview of the pond. An American eel, we found that last year. It actually swims up the waterfall, and it matures in streams. It takes about 20 years for them to mature before they decide to head back to the ocean and spawn in the Sargasso Sea and complete their life cycle. There's salamanders in the stream, two-line salamanders. You can see an egret hanging out on the entrance and a little garden with milkweed, I should add. This is the William Cullen Bryant Preserve on the grounds of the Nassau County Art Museum. Many people don't know it. Jean Henning, former director of art, is stewarding this place. And you can see the diversity of forests and habitats in the rewilded areas, these new meadows they're forming. Leeds Pond Preserve, a 33-acre habitat, our largest pond, and you can see some of the different examples of habitats below. On the lower right, left-hand corner, lower right, is beach and a marsh habitat complex. A most beautiful place to pass by in Port Washington on Manhasset Bay, if you ever like, with an osprey nest and some ducks on Leeds Pond, and some kudzu, which Hilda will speak about later. All right. And then I'd like to end also with the just brief story about monarch butterflies and how they connect us. So our habitats, let me refer back to our main slide. 80% of our peninsula is developed, 20% of it's undeveloped. Of that undeveloped space, 10% of it is called cultural, either golf courses, cemeteries, fields. 10% is wild. Of those wild areas, we've come together to unite really the most important ones, and we look forward to also inviting other important community stewards that represent other important habitats together as we grow. Yes? Call out the salt marshes? Oh yes, definitely. So each of these, very briefly, each of these habitats, each of the colors here represents a different type of habitat. It's a depiction of the diversity that we share. And it displays the connectivity, and the contiguity, and the species, the ability of species to transit Port Washington. And all along on some of the fringes of the peninsula, let's see here, I think I have a mouse. Here it is. We have East Creek, our largest salt marsh estuary, Halfmoon Beach, the Hempstead Harbor Shoreline Corridor, and Leeds Pond Preserve. It's a rare ecosystem that's disappearing due to sea level rise that we'll talk about more later. Okay? And so I'd like to end with this map. Where it's taking us is into the future to conduct more in-depth studies of our peninsula to inform conservation actions. It all starts with a map and then on-the-ground research and studies. And it is, as you can see, a really diverse peninsula. I'd like to end by saying that we have an archipelago of oases, of different habitats, fragmented by a sea of development in light blue, as you can see, and all connected, though, by the monarch butterflies and birds and insects and winged creatures that can actually take us and travel all across the preserve, the peninsula, as well as connecting us as a community. And the fragmentation of habitats is just an indicator that we need to come together all the more strongly. We'll shout out to the monarch butterflies later. Okay, with that, I'll leave it to Margaret, and we'll introduce the panelists. Thank you, Margaret.
We're going to be going up onto the stage now. Thank you, David. Thank you, David, for your comprehensive explanation of preliminary, yes, but thank you for introducing us to the peninsula. I would now like to introduce our esteemed panelists, beginning with someone who uniquely combines rigorous scientific training with deep ecological wisdom. Reverend Dr. Hilda Palsdator is a nature-based educator and community organizer. She holds a PhD in biochemistry for research performed at the Max Planck Institute of Biophysics and worked at the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory and NYU Medical School. She served as president of the board at the Science Museum of Long Island, where she stewards the 36-acre Leeds Pond Preserve. Dr. Palsador co-founded Rewild Long Island and Transition Townport, Washington, and established Soul Center in 2017, offering eco-spiritual rituals and holistic healing practices. She leads programs at the Mindful Connection of Long Island, Commune, and Sands Point Preserve, coordinating Rewilding the Soul and the Eco Dharma programming at the Natural Dharma Fellowship, and serves on the advisory board of the Center for Earth Ethics. Welcome, Hilda. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
From understanding our connection to nature to creating pathways through it. Our next panelist designs the trails that make wild spaces accessible. Mike Beatty is the president of Concerned Long Island Mountain Bikers, better known as CLIMB, and has studied sustainable trail designs in British Columbia, Utah, and the Smoky Mountains. In 2009, he won a national award in trail design for Highbridge Park in the category of wildlife and environmental compatibility. CLIMB has made available to the public and maintains about 200 miles of recreational mountain bike trails across Long Island, including the Hempstead Harbor Woods. He is also an advisory representative for mountain biking on the State Trails Council. Welcome. Thank you. Our final panelist oversees the day-to-day stewardship of one of Long Island's premier historic landmarks. Jeremiah Bosgang serves as the executive director of the nonprofit Sands Point Conservancy, where he oversees Nassau County's 216-acre historic landmark property. His responsibilities encompass managing a team of more than 25 staff members, strategic planning and organizational growth, financial management, cultural and educational programming, and facility operations and maintenance. Prior to his appointment as executive director in April 2022, Jeremiah spent a decade as the Conservancy's film and television production manager, overseeing all on-location media productions. He holds an undergraduate degree from the University of Chicago and a certificate from UCLA's Anderson School of Management Executive Program. Welcome. All right, so let's get this panel started. So, Hilda, can you paint the big picture of biodiversity at this Leeds Pond Preserve? Tell us about the plants and animals.
Yes, I can. And I first want to just acknowledge, I love the audience. It's like all my friends are here. And I'm really hoping that we keep the panel contribution brief so we can have a really lively Q&A and interactive conversation here, because there's so much knowledge in the room. And maybe if Stefan Perl could just wave. A really knowledgeable naturalist and doing so much work with ecosystem restoration there at Green Tree Foundation. We're super excited to collaborate. That's what I wanted to say too. I represent SMLI, Science Museum of Long Island, here tonight, but I work at Sands Point Preserve. So I am a cross-pollinator. You see me in many different places where nature is protected and cared for, and I really enjoy forging collaboration. Collaboration, I think, is also foundational to help not just in ecosystem, but also ecosystems. Collaborating, reaching across the aisle and working together and sharing resources. I'm really big on that. Sharing both the knowledge that we have and also the tools, and that's what we do at the coalition. And then back to your question. As a cross-pollinator, I've been wandering the grounds both at Sands Point Preserve and Leeds Pond Preserve that I'm representing here tonight. I really enjoyed getting to know the grounds with my kids when they were little. They went to camp there. It's a wonderful laboratory, nature-based laboratory. There is the pond, there is the woodlands, and you have just such a fun way to learn, going from the beach to the impoundment to the woodlands. And we have, I see it a little bit like an island, as David mentioned. It's fragmented. There are very busy streets, so accessibility is not great. And but we have a thriving population of raccoons. And they're really skilled at navigating the traffic, I'm glad to share. They think they should inhabit the carriage house. We're redirecting them. We have woodchucks and all the usual suspects, squirrels and all kinds of
And
critters
foxes,
there.
right?
A residential fox family. Occasionally the coyote comes by and the fox is still there. But the coyote, brave coyote, crosses the roads, and I think it's to access the freshwater should be freshwater stream. But there is also the occasional deer that we've been trying to figure out how they get there, but we see them on the cameras. They're not residential, so the coyote and the deer will they'll come and they'll go hunting or hydrate and then leave, and that makes a lot of sense. The other day I was with interns from Transition Town, Port Washington, and I was explaining to them, the biodiversity in this part of the woodlands that we've restored health to. Ecosystem restoration is taking place there. That means restoring health to the ecosystem. And we've been removing kudzu. Kudzu, does everybody here know kudzu? K-U-D-Z-U. It's known as the wine that ate the South. We call it the kudzu beast, and we're taming it. And when it was discovered, actually, like probably 10 years ago, it became, it was on the map. The other day, I was remembering that there was a professor walking the grounds with their student, and I asked him what he was doing because he had put pokeweed right on his, he looked really funny and he was really engaged, and he said, yeah, this is the Museum of Invasive Species. I take my students here every year. And he pointed out the kudzu, and he was like, this is gonna be covering every backyard in just a few years because it grows really fast and it's completely uncontrollable. The Department of Environmental Conservation came in and inspected this 2 acres of kudzu. Everything beneath the kudzu cover was dead. And this was flagged because it was a real problem area judged by the DEC. And when this became known to us, we knew where to start. It's a small preserve, so it's easier for us to manage this preserve compared to many other preserves. So we knew this was the biggest problem at the preserve. And obviously, if you have a monoculture of kudzu, you do not have biodiversity. That should be clear to everybody. So we did not want to follow the guidelines of the DEC and just drench the area with glyphosate. That's Roundup. That was recommended. And that was, to us, not an option because we have children running around. This is also in the watershed there. We did not want to have a chemical management of this beast. So Frank Piccinini and Spadefoot, who wanted to be here tonight, but I want to just mention, if you should really look up their work. They're also working at Sands Point Preserve, because when I saw, and at Baxter, right? Yes, and UU. I think we share resources. So when we saw what he was doing with us, their team, with their mechanical management, so they don't do chemical management of weeds. They came in with these machines and rip out large chunks and really removed mechanically the kudzu and discarded it properly. And then they work with us this summer. We are going to be sharing resources with Rewild Long Island. Their interns, Rashu is here at the table. We are going to be going in every Wednesday morning with Spadefoot to eradicate the kudzu together. So there's a youth group, the Rewild Long Island youth group, that helps with that. So the other day I was there with the interns from Transition Town, and I said, this area is now rich in biodiversity. We've planted 1,000 trees. And as I said it, a hawk just descended upon us in front of us. I thought it was going to land on me, and just went and caught something and took off with the.
That's great. That's great.
So there was no more examples needed there. Like it's really. But is Peggy Maslow here? Because I wanted to also call out the most amazing pollinator garden, Audubon. So North Shore Audubon. Oh yes, yeah, yes. Everybody's welcome to come help us on the grounds. Yes,
Right.
yes. This is. We'll get to the community engagement part tonight. There's a lot of work to do at the peninsula, and it's a lot of fun too.
So
And yes.
I'm going to wait for that piece. I want to
Yeah.
get on to talk about Mike Vitti about what, if you could briefly describe the Hempstead Harbor Woods and the challenges to the biodiversity at that site.
Well, Hempstead Harbor Woods originally was a sand mine. Then it became a dump. And because of the dumping, it became fodder for invasive plants. So again, if you want to do a invasive plant study, come to Hempstead Harbor Woods. But we don't have kudzu, so you guys got everything. Some parts of it are amazingly all natural with, pine trees and understory trees, and it looks very biodiverse. But other places are covered with porcelain berry. Porcelain berry is a non-native invasive from the Asian continent. We call it a tree killing machine. It crawls up the trees, covers them, covers the leaves. They can't do photosynthesis anymore, so they die. Then the tree falls, and more trees get infected with the porcelain berry. So the area where the porcelain berry is growing becomes like a killing field. And under the lumps of porcelain berry are the bodies of the dead trees. The other thing we have in Hempstead Harbor Woods is when they did the sand mining, they dug so deep that they actually went into the water table. And because they went down to the clay layer, the water table infiltration did not drain because of the clay, so it became wetlands. And these wetlands, like freshwater wetlands, are the most biodiverse habitats you can find on Long Island, and a good indicator species of how healthy a freshwater wetlands are frogs. We have lots of frogs in Hempstead Harbor Woods, and I think that's an indication that the freshwater wetlands are in good shape. Now, Harbor Links also is adjacent to Hempstead Harbor Woods, and the drainage system for Harbor Links Golf Course drains right into Hempstead Harbor Woods. And luckily, Harbor Links is following an organic program for maintenance of the golf course, so the frogs are still alive.
That's good. Do you want to add anything else, or we'll come back to you?
No, there's a lot of things that we do to maintain the trails because the non-natives grow faster than the natives, and we're volunteer-based, so we maintain the trails, and it takes us approximately 40 hours per season per mile of maintenance to maintain a trail there. So we have 7 miles of trails, so do the math.
Lots of volunteers. Jeremiah, what is the most significant biodiversity threat you are seeing at Sands Point Preserve?
I remember we spoke about this, and now I'm blanking on what my answer is supposed to be. When we talked about when we talked about defining our terms of most significant.
Right.
And because the Sands Point Preserve has many biodiversity threats, but I'm trying to remember, was most significant, most pervasive, or which one?
Well, I think you talked about invasives.
Right.
Also the pond algae blooms.
Sure, great, thank you,
Yes.
thank you for that reminder. So among the challenges are invasive species remediation, which Mike and Hilder have talked about, and we have our share of that at the preserve too. Just one little thing about invasive species, and then I'll talk about our pond, that I found as not having nearly the background that these guys do in the science of it all, but the insidious thing about invasive species to an untrained eye is they don't look bad. They look nice. You know, porcelain berry growing up over the trunk of a tree is really a beautiful thing in a lot of ways. And
Sure
English...
And the berry. The berry itself.
A bouquet of porcelain berries.
The berry itself is beautiful.
The berry itself is beautiful. And English ivy, which, you know, at the greatest colleges and universities across the country is a hallmark of, you know, classiness. But so it was kind of weird and kind of ironic to me that we were spending all this time and energy and money tearing this stuff out. And we did get some pushback at times from visitors to the preserve. And they would say, like Mike was saying, how it looked like a wasteland after the invasives were removed. And it looked really like a wasteland, like it went from being this lush green corridor, almost canopied walkways as you go along our pond down to the beach. And it went to then just being this naked area with dirt, but we had to go through that stage in order to get to the replanting and the reforesting with native species and plants. And now those things that we planted, some of the grasses and the pollinating plants are starting to bloom, and so now those people who were understandably upset when we tore all the stuff out, now they're starting to understand and say, oh, okay, I see what you were going for. So that was native species, and I'll speak briefly about one of the other initiatives. We have at the Sands Point Preserve a pond. It's a man-made pond that was built probably around the turn of the century by the Goulds or the Guggenheims, who were the primary residents of this 216-acre property back then. And it's a concrete bottom pond, 33,000 gallons. And it's beautiful with a little stone bridge that crosses over. And if you guys have been there, you know what it looks like. Anyway, the water over the decades had been left untreated. There's a natural sprout area that comes from the aquifer that does bring fresh water in, but otherwise we're at the bottom of a sort of a hilled area, and a lot of the runoff of chemicals from the parking lot, oil drippings and so forth, we don't have a lot, but whatever there is in rain would come down into the pond, and all of the sulfite, natural sulfite and nitrate levels of the water would be thrown into imbalance, and there'd be huge algae blooms all throughout the pond. It kind of looked like St. Patrick's Day every day, and our pond was at times iridescent green, not just light green, but like this glowing green that looked like it was, you know, nuclear or something. Anyway, it had been untreated for many years, and we decided that we wanted to see what methods there would be to try to clear this water, the water which is this resource for many of the native species that David alluded to earlier, both animal and plant, birds that would come and use the water, turtles that would be swimming in the pond. And so we partnered with Frank Piccinini, the ghost personality of the evening, his name you'll hear mentioned, Spadefoot Design. And we engaged this very interesting, innovative technology that is non-chemical. So how do you treat this imbalance in the chemicals? Well, you can add chemicals to the pond, or what this Canadian firm called NBI Organic had a proprietary technology that really hadn't been tested in the United States on a large scale, through which they inject into the water through a distribution system that goes all along the bottom of the pond, kind of like the drip tubing that a lot of us have in our gardens that just lets out water. You just leave the hose turned on and it drips out. A similar system is spread through the bottom of this pond, and injected into the water are these biomes, tiny living organisms. Hilda, am I describing a biome correctly?
Soil bacteria,
Say it again.
yeah. Soil bacteria.
What she said. And,
She teaches us all.
and so these little organisms, and why do we inject them in the water? They eat up the sediment on the bottom of the pond that's sitting there. It's like 6 inches of junk that's accumulated. And they eat it, they destroy it, and essentially become this natural, native cleaning agent. And we have technology adjacent to the pond, housed in a trailer, that measures all different levels of the water, in, things that are far more technical than I'm going to pretend to understand. But scientists can read remotely in Canada from our location. Did you want to say something, David?
Actually, I wanted to ask you, as a segue, into the goats.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. I'll get to that in 1 second. Let me just finish up on the biomes, and then we'll move to the larger organisms, the goats. So anyway, maybe I'm going on too long about this. That's this program. We've had it. This pump. It's a 2-year plan. It's been going for about a year. The effects have been truly remarkable. Not so much to the naked eye. There are areas where you can now see to the bottom of the pond where you couldn't before. But the data that we're gathering and all the indicators about the actual composition and the elemental proportions.
And I just want to say this is a lot about what we do in our meetings, is share ideas and how to deal with the kudzu or the invasives or the algae blooms, and just problem solving and sharing resources.
Absolutely. So anyway, that's the pond eutrophication project.
That's where the goats come in.
Oh, okay. And then I'll quickly mention, I'm sorry, I don't want to monopolize this. So another way that we're always looking at different innovative approaches to these challenges that we face. And because a part of the reason is we want to support new technologies, but also it's a very affordable way. We have in the Sands Point Preserve, we have a real resource that these different inventors and scientists desperately need. They need the testing ground to prove the efficacy of these technologies. So a place like Enboy Organic in Canada is incentivized to come to the preserve and give us what would be a very good deal, so to speak, on the equipment and the technology, because what they get out of it, potentially in success, is a case study that will help them then to monetize their technology and spread the technology. And that model that we've applied at the preserve of partnering with these innovators, we've done it multiple times. Another example that David alluded to, and Hilda, the goats. So there are different ways of remediating invasive plant species, right? You can pull the kudzu out, you can pull the mugwort out manually, you can use machines to pull it out. There's a group that has applied living goats. They take goats and they rope off the specific area that they want to remediate, whether it's 1/2 acre or 3 acres. By rope it off, I mean they build a temporary fence, and they put these goats into that roped off area, and goats eat a tremendous amount of greenery, the same greenery that you're trying to pull out. They'll eat English ivy, they'll eat poison ivy, they'll eat mugwort, they'll eat basically any plant that they are allowed to consume. And so it's this completely natural, completely native process that had been employed. I learned about this in a test project that this group had done in Riverside Park in Manhattan. And the photographs that they showed of the before and after of
And
what
when are they coming? The goats.
The goats are going to be coming potentially as early as this spring.
Okay.
And the question is how many goats will be coming?
Okay.
Because the more goats you have, obviously, the more grounds you can cover. But the thing that's exciting about it, the last thing I'll say, and then I will shut up, is that beyond being an innovative way to combat invasive species, a native way to do it, a natural way to do it. For us at the Sands Point Preserve, we're always looking for points of engagement for the community. For us to be a living, relatable, relevant location. It's great. We're proud of our castles, our 100-year-old, 110-year-old landmark buildings, and doing tours and talking about the Gilded Age, and that's really an important part of who we are. But we want to appeal in other ways, too. And that's why we have a playground, and we have dog runs, and we have hiking trails, and we offer the programming we do. So similarly, this way of combating invasive species through the goats will appeal, so we hope, to different constituencies who wouldn't otherwise, not like you guys who are interested in practically any type of invasive species remediation you guys will be interested in, but young people, kids, and their aunts, uncles, parents, and grandparents who might not otherwise be engaged. When you have goats on the side of your hill eating, that becomes an engagement point. And so we're excited about that and the potential, and I hope I answered.
No, that's
the
great.
question.
Thank you. I want to go to Mike because he has a lot of innovative ways of dealing with different environmental problems or difficulties.
First, I want to say something about the goats. At Edgewood Preserve in Comac, the DEC had goats. They fenced off the section. They were supposed to eat all these invasives, including multiflora rose, thorns and everything. But every time I visited the goats, they were sleeping on the job. So I don't know.
Yes, the goat interview process is intense. And we put them through a multi-stage process. We check their references, and we don't hire just any goats at the Sands Point Preserve.
Just diligent ones.
So what was the question again?
So I wanted to find out if you could share examples of success stories or positive changes you've seen.
May I speak for one?
Okay,
About
what?
the invasive species?
Okay, and then, okay.
Yes. So all of our habitats on the Port Washington Peninsula, there's an edge effect. The edges of the habitats are a vector for invasive species to enter into them, as are our trails and fragmentation. The majority of Port Washington's vegetation is non-native. A great deal of it is invasive. However, over the last few decades, it's becoming increasingly understood that invasive species in different sites and locations, basically on a place-based study, actually support wildlife, diversity of birds. Phragmites in particular. Phragmites in particular, it provides, in some cases, structure for small animals and vertebrates, and also birds to nest in. Just yesterday, there was a publication that came out by one of my colleagues, Eric Kiviat, who studied the effects of the interactions between wildlife and Japanese knotweed that the UU Church is actually currently working on. So there's a lot of emerging research on the benefits and the downsides of invasive species as well.
So let's hear from Mike about your successes.
What I noticed when I was walking through the woods, and I noticed there were sections that had invasive species and sections that had native species. So when I was designing the trails, I would design the trail along the edge of the invasive species so that it would keep the invasive species from spreading into the native species area. So, because to control the invasive species in the giant area that they inhabit would be a gargantuan task. It would require a lot of money, a lot of hours, and that's something that we can't do. So what we can do is protect what little native planted areas in the preserve occur. The other thing is when you bring in, like this park had a lot of negative use in the way of motorcycles and ATVs and A lot of the times, the only parks we would get mountain bike trails approved in are parks that nobody really cared about. So we would take the dregs and turn them into diamonds. By bringing, because when you bring in a positive recreational activity, the people doing the negative activity don't want to be seen, and they go elsewhere.
Can you also talk about how the trail system mitigates, I know, stormwater and how, yes.
Yes, so we designed the trails to be sustainable, which means it resists erosion and use. So you have two forms of erosion. People using the trails would cause erosion, and weather events would cause erosion. So we designed the trails to have lots of grade reversals. A grade reversal is when the trail goes up and down. So that does two things. It makes it fun, makes it feel like you're on a roller coaster, but also water cannot travel uphill. So we walked the trails during rainstorms to figure out how the erosion was occurring, and we've discovered that water traveling down the trail, if there's no grade reversal, after it passes 50 to 75 yards, it picks up enough volume and velocity to start moving material. And the further along the water goes without a grade reversal, the more material can be lost. Back in the old days, before we knew about sustainable trail design, we found that after a heavy storm came by, we would lose like maybe a foot or 2 feet of dirt. And that would cause, it was unappealing to ride or hike, but also it was dangerous. So we learned all these sustainable trails design techniques. And the other part of sustainability is when you build the trail that people love, they want to help you maintain it. They want to help you preserve it. They want to help you in any way possible because they absolutely love that trail.
Yes, and we go to the Hempstead Harbor Woods daily, so I know, I love those trails. I wanted to ask Hildur, how does your site connect with other habitats on the peninsula, and why is that connectivity important for biodiversity?
That's a great question. So if you've been by what we call Leeds Pond, it's really an impoundment, and we are connected through, so what's called Leeds Pond is really a watershed. It's a collection point for about 2,000 acres of upstream water. So it's draining into residential, golf courses, surface waters are really collected there in what we call Leeds Pond. Mm-hmm. And then there's a human-made structure that keeps Leeds Pond sort of connected to the bay, but that particular structure I wanted to point out because in terms of accessibility, like we saw tonight, accessibility is key. If animals wanted to travel from the bay to the pond, to the supposedly freshwater stream, if people are, good with their septic and whatever they're
fertilizers
applying,
and
the chemical maintenance of their spaces. But if we wanted a healthy ecosystem, we would, of course, think about all the upstream backyard, front yard spaces, livable spaces. We should stop applying chemicals and think about the animals downstreams that are relying on this for hydration. But we should also think about how are we going to connect wildlife to the bay from the pond. And sadly, there was a recent expensive roadwork was done there without this in mind, because the town is missing really the sustainability part here would be to consult with wildlife biologists, for example, to consult with, for example, CTUC. They're very clued into wildlife corridors and passageway. And frankly, their biggest concern is roadkills. I often have people ask me about the coyote, if it's safe. We are the most dangerous animals on this island. And the most dangerous animal to us on the island is ticks. Ticks, tiny little animal. But this animal, here's the good news. If you remove invasives, it's been shown that certain areas harbor, so its tick infestation can be related to certain invasive growth. So when you're restoring health to ecosystems, we may be able to manage the tick epidemic. But back to the pond, I would really have preferred that this particular structure that was built between the bay and the pond would have taken into account even large animals, and I'm going to say it, river otters. Anybody seen one here? They're in Glen Cove. Did you know? So SeaTuck, I have it from the experts at SeaTuck. I'm not making this up. River otters are making a comeback across the island. And do you want to speak to that?
Yes, Mike Bottini, who's an expert on river otters, said that the East Creek, which is the estuary at the very northern portion of the peninsula, is a very likely habitat for river otters, as well as many others. I think 200 species of birds. It's a really wonderful place, yes.
And in Leeds Pond, we'll be happy with eel, if they could make it. But even the fish passageway there is kind of, it's not ideally built. So when we build human-made structures, we really should be thinking of wildlife as well for a healthy, intact ecosystem. And it's also actually, you know, in some parts of the world, especially on the West Coast, they give great thought to wildlife corridors and paths and tunnels. And it makes your life more beautiful because you don't have to drive past all these roadkills. Like, who likes like getting up in the morning, driving to work, and there's like a dead possum, then there's a dead raccoon. It's just sad.
It is sad.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes. So I feel like as I'm thinking about the connectivity, of course, we're connected through the pollinator garden, and I made a very brief reference, and I want to make it again to Peggy Maslow and the North Shore Audubon crew who's been working on the ground for decades. We have the most amazing pollinator gardens, and with Rewild Long Island, we've planted a monarch sanctuary, so we always have like a landing strip there, so they come, there's a lot of milkweed on the ground as well. And we're grateful for the songbirds that come with, like, it's amazing. It's a tiny little preserve, but there's hundreds of different kinds of birds there.
If you create it, they will come.
Yes, you create it, they come.
Yes. Jeremiah, what gives you hope? What's working at Sands Point Preserve? So I know you talked about the cliff stabilization program.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Oh, boy. Well, we have, I mentioned before about how we like to support these innovative approaches to addressing whatever native or natural challenges we have, and the biomes in our pond and the goats on our hillside. Another feature of the Sands Point Preserve that's a very nature challenge are our glacial cliffs. David can speak to this much better to give the context just of what a glacial cliff is, but dates back to when Long Island separated, right, David, from the mainland, and in whatever Pleistocene, whatever era, thousands and thousands of years ago, and we have these huge rocks known as glacial erratics that are scattered all around the preserve, and these also date back, help me out here, David, how old are these glacial erratics? They could be
From the last advance of the Laurentine ice sheet that pushed forward like a bulldozer and created the North Shore. And so the glacial erratics were drifted on an ice bed and have been deposited all across our region. Yes, and the Maritime Bluffs.
20,000 years, give or take a year.
So maybe 18.
Yeah.
Geologists have really nailed it down, including Herb Mills, who's our regional foremost geologist, who recently passed away as well. And he has published many papers on the peninsula about our geology.
So the geology at the Sands Point Preserve with these glacial cliffs is really not only beautiful, but has its own challenges with cliff erosion. the erosion of these cliffs, and this is not unique to the Sands Point Preserve. This is a phenomenon that happens all over the world, in New Orleans and all across Long Island and throughout the Mediterranean. And scientists have been struggling for years to figure out ways to combat the effects of glacial or cliff erosion, bluff erosion. And we have had our own experiments at the preserve over the decades with the buildings of these huge concrete bulkheads that are meant to protect against the waves and the tow of the waves that come and eat away at the base of the cliff, or the rainwater that runs off the side of the cliff, not unlike as was being described on the hiking trails, the effects of the rainwater running down the side that Mike was describing.
As a former member of Boy Scout Troop 51, those cliffs are perfect for climbing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we have created trails that live still there today.
Yes.
But don't. This is a secret.
Yes,
We
that's,
try
you're
to
not supposed to do
discourage-
that.
We try not to. We try to discourage the climbing, but yes, they are. It is enticing for that. But so in any event, the point I was going to make is we're always searching for ways to combat this erosion, because over the years the cliff face is moving back by not just inches but by feet, and you can see how it's falling off, and we're losing essentially our ground. So there was a group, it's a small firm called Coastal Technologies, and it's actually a family business based here in Manhasset. And it's a father and son business, and they had the Thetos family, and they had developed a number of different devices for various ecological applications. They have oyster bed farming. They have and they have this cliff stabilization technique, which they presented to me and said, look, we have this technique. We're trying to test its efficacy, very much like what I was saying before, how we can be a laboratory at the preserve for these technologies. And what the technology is, can I describe it very quickly?
Yes,
So
please
what
do.
it is, very basically, is this honeycomb-shaped grid that's around 3 feet and it's like maybe hexagonal shaped. And it has these little cubbies. It's made of a plastic, a heavy-duty plastic. And what happens, what the science is that these honeycombs are screwed into the side of the cliff face by a big corkscrew that's driven in. And inside the little cubbies are planted, different plant species are planted in there. And they're specifically chosen by their root systems. So plant species that have especially large, long-reaching root systems that also have other effects that might be pollinators and attract different bird species or other bumblebees or butterflies, hummingbirds. Anyway, the thinking was that if these plastic devices could stabilize the plant growth in the early stages of growth, then once these plants would mature and not be washed away by the rainwater and the ocean water tow, the Long Island Sound tow, then they would take root and effectively stabilize the strata, stabilize those outer layers of dirt and sand so that they would be impervious to washing away. So we talked to the Thetos family, and we did a test installation of about 100 square feet of these devices, a little strip. And if you were to come to the Sands Point Preserve and you walked by the cliff face where these were installed, you would see it looks kind of like a strip of hair plugs. Not that I would know much about hair plugs, but I imagine what hair plugs would be like. And it looks like you're seeing this dirt cliff face, and all of a sudden there's this little strip of green. And sure enough, over 2 years that we had let this project evolve, the plants took root, and we were able to remove the plastic devices, which can be reused in another application. And you'll see that there's this strip of 100 square feet of greenery. So
That's wonderful.
it was a very successful experiment, proof of concept, and we used that working with CTC, Coastal Technologies. And I'm not at liberty to give the specifics here now just yet, But after many months of applications for grant support from different agencies, state and federal agencies, we have been given a preliminary notification. We still have to go through one more stage, that we are going to be the recipients of close to a $500,000
Wow.
grant
Congratulations.
to cover a 400,000 square foot section, not 100 square feet, 400,000 square foot section of the bluff. It won't be the entire bluff. Believe it or not, the entire bluff of the Sands Point Preserve is even more massive. But with this grant, we are going to be able to cover a significant part of the bluff. And part of what's so exciting about it is that the organization that's giving the grant, I like to take grant money from anybody, but this organization is a national endowment. And so what's going to happen is the Sands Point Preserve is going to become a case study on a national level at universities and colleges across the country who research and use these national grants as points of study for future application of the technology. And we believe that once it becomes public, if the success we enjoyed with the little 100 square foot patch translates to a multi-thousand square foot application, this could be an explosive kind of discovery with an impact beyond just the preserve, beyond Long Island, globally, truly, at the risk of sounding hyperbolic. It could be huge, and that's one of the most exciting.
And thank you for segueing us into the effects of climate change, because I think we will see a lot more of that with climate change. But I wanted to ask David, how does changes in our climate amplify existing local pressures on biodiversity?
So I've been studying and mapping the effects of climate change on Long Island since the foundation of the Center for Disaster Resilience Solutions in 2015. I serve as president on that organization, along with my dear friend Art Mittelstadt, who's listening in the audience. Climate change is affecting us in a tremendous number of ways. As an island peninsula, we saw a glimpse of this with Hurricane Sandy, a 9-foot storm event that flooded large portions of our peninsula, and not just put us out of power, but also heavily impacted and degraded some of our coastal habitats. On top of that, we have sea levels rising. As the globe warms, sea levels this century are projected to rise by 2.5 feet by 2050, perhaps 9 feet by 2100. However, just as Jeremiah was mentioning, the habitats, the maritime bluffs that are eroding will also be undercut by sea level rise. One of the things that we can do as a community is create these living shorelines, these structures for life around our coast that not only protect the biodiversity and the habitats we have, but also allow them to live in the future. So in the coming decades, we'll see more and more of that. I can speak more to climate change perhaps when we have more time.
Okay.
Another conversation.
Okay, well, it's a huge topic. Mike, how do you see the impacts of climate change on the Hempstead Harbor Woods? Do you see them?
Well, last fall, we had a drought. I think it didn't rain for 2 months. And it was weird because last year in the spring, we had the most rain we've ever seen. And part of this trail that we built through the wetlands was underwater. The water levels were so high, I couldn't believe it. And then in the fall, we had 2 months of no rain, and it's the water level. And now coming into this spring, we had a pretty dry spring. The water levels are the lowest I've ever seen it. So
Has that affected wildlife, or can you tell yet?
I can't tell yet, but I haven't seen too many frogs. So they're the indicator. And then with the rain, you'd normally have a lot of erosion issues. We didn't have too much erosion issues here, but we were building a BMX park out in Setauket near Stony Brook, and they got 10 inches of rain in a few hours. that's when all those dams broke and Blydenburg emptied out and Mill Pond and Stony Brook emptied out. Well, our BMX park that we spent 6 months building got destroyed. So that's because the parking lot was draining into the area where we were building the park.
And-
It's happening.
Yeah, yeah. Have you seen effects at Leeds Pond with the shoreline?
Yeah, we're very concerned about, we pointed it out earlier about the salt marshes, and there's just a little bit left of an ecosystem there that's really critical. It serves a critical function, salt marshes, and that's all going underwater. So we're seeing the rising sea levels, of course, and when it rains, it pours in this changing climate. You've all probably experienced it by now, flash flooding, and that's devastating to us, not just us, when we're driving our cars and getting, into unsafe situations, but we should all be thinking about the porosity of the porosity of the ground where we're living, because when it rains these days, there's so much moisture in the air, and it literally pours, and we don't have the capacity to manage all that stormwater. So at Leeds Pond Preserve, we've been working with bioswales and other technologies to reroute the stormwater and keep it from just, running straight into the bay and affecting the wildlife there. Mm-hmm. And I know most people here in the audience, you wouldn't come to this event unless you cared about biodiversity. So I'm sort of speaking to the choir, but biodiversity matters to us because we're part of this web of life. And in this changing climate, we're seeing entire ecosystems drowning, literally. And then you're seeing this with this flash flooding. All kinds of problems are happening. You can just think of little birds that are nesting and just getting, thrown out of their nests.
Several endangered species, the piping plover, and also that lives just next to Sands Point Preserve. And I was just discussing this with Peggy Maslow 2 days ago, the least tern.
Yes.
And the piping, the plover, I'm sorry, the striped sandpiper. Peggy, you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong on that.
I don't know that she's here tonight, but that we care for, in the last 50 years, we've lost billions of birds. There used to be, some of us remember driving and having the wind chill, like the effect of bugs, and you had to stop the car and clean it. And there's just an incredible decline in the insect population, which means we're losing pollinators, and we're not going to be able to feed ourselves and each other if we don't take care of the ecosystems where we live. It's all connected, right?
And I would like to talk about what we can do, unless you want to add
let's
one.
talk about
Okay,
this.
what can we do?
Yes, what can
So,
we do?
Mike, what actions can the general public take to help reduce the threats of to biodiversity?
Well, they can come help us remove invasives from Hempstead Harbor Woods, but you'll have to be resistant to poison ivy. The other thing is to get connected with your politicians and make sure that they're also working to help mitigate climate change.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, and let's talk about when in these extreme winds that we're experiencing, people are like, oh yeah, I can't have any trees because they fall on my car or on my house and this and that. So the trees that are falling are the non-natives, almost every time. And it's the Norway maple, it's shallow rooted. When I first moved here 15 years ago, I was reading the newspaper and a real estate agent said, plant Norway maples, they grow so fast. They grow really fast because they invest all their energy above ground. They literally grow up and not down. If you plant an oak tree, a lot of energy is spent on digging deep into the ground, and it creates porosity. It helps with stormwater management, right? it makes the ground more porous. Our turf, the backyard, the front, the perfect lawn, is next to cement in porosity. They're very shallow roots and almost like compact, like totally useless soil beneath it.
And right by the Hempstead Harbor Woods, there were a lot of trees down on one side of the cliffs right there. And they took them out as a cliff stabilization program, which was frankly devastating. Do you want to talk about that a little bit and what might happen soon?
Yeah, so the houses, I think that's Summit Avenue up there that back up to the preserve. That cliff face was mostly Cretaceous clay. So Cretaceous clay is very resistant to erosion, but when it was eroding, it was obvious because it was very white. So it looked like there was a lot of erosion. The town wanted to do a slope stabilization project where they were going to rip out all the trees and then terrace the slope, and they never added any. They eventually did it, but with P.W. Green's help, we got them to save this hoodoo, which
What's a hoodoo? I don't think most people know.
Okay, a hoodoo is, it's like clay that was pushed up by a glacier, and then the soft stuff eroded around it. Go ahead. And it looks like fingers.
Herb Mills described this about 20 years ago. These are just gigantic fingers of sand, like pinnacles, basically, that frame the entire environment. If you can climb up there and you can see the entire surrounding 1,000 acres of what used to be the sand mine. Anyhow, they were actually sand, till, clay that was stuck together from 2 ice ages ago. So we're talking about 70,000 years ago. So it's part of our geological heritage, which Mike is explaining here, and I think it's a real monument, something that we have to save.
Yeah, so we went to the town of North Hempstead's town council meetings and explained to them what a hoodoo is and why it's important that we should preserve it. And luckily, they agreed. And so Lynn and I went, before they started the slope stabilization project, Lynn and I went with caution tape and caution taped off a big area around the hoodoo so that when they came in with the bulldozers, they wouldn't damage it. It's still there now. So it's mostly clay, very dense clay, and you'll see these in Utah where the dense clay has actually turned to stone. This hasn't turned to stone yet. I don't think we'll see it in our lifetime, but it's pretty cool. The word hoodoo is a Native American term, and they thought it was spirits coming out of the earth that wanted to get to heaven.
So
Anyway,
how many trees were taken down at that time?
probably millions.
Okay, and there's a second phase that's now being proposed. So that's something that we should all look into.
Yeah.
It's probably the biggest deforestation in our area potentially right now. I think
it's the most egregious destruction of habitat in Port Washington in recent history. Mike was saying about 30 acres, and they just saved the hoodoo.
Yeah.
And this used to be forested bluffs and dozens of varieties of native trees that were there. That were just taken down and graded the entire slope.
Yeah, so from the edge of the trail called Hexus, you can see the destruction, and we named it that trail Hexus because from a movie my kids used to watch called Fern Gully. And Hexus was the name of this machine that was cutting down the rainforest and chipping it up. And that's actually what they did. They used a very similar machine that was grabbing the trees and chopping them up. But an interesting thing to note is that slope used to be at the water's edge, like at Sands Point. But that's the amount of sand that they removed from that area. Yeah, so there's another slope stabilization project, phase 2, that they're proposing. So we might have to let our town council people know that we don't think this is a good idea. And it's actually, there's no erosion happening on that part of the slope. So stay tuned for that, more information.
We've been talking a lot about this to try and understand what's going on there. What are the benefits and what are the problems with this, and why it's being done. And our entire coalition has been completely puzzled by this problem. But it's something that is definitely an advocacy effort that we can stand behind to protect this area from deforestation and damage.
Yeah, giving oak trees a safe place to live is essential, and they're critical stewards to ecosystems, just health and biodiversity. A single oak tree can host like hundreds of different types of caterpillars, and that, of course, feeds our bird life. Oak trees are doing incredible service in terms of stormwater management. And so dedicating large areas to these amazing trees, the right tree in the right place, and stopping the planting of, for example, what's covering the woodlands at the Science Museum is English ivy. It's pretty. It doesn't have a single hole in it. It looks like plastic because no one is eating it. And it creates just a monoculture. So you have no biodiversity. It's not feeding any wildlife, no other function than to look pretty. Then you have probably 90% of our woodlands are Norway maple. It spreads like weeds. So if you have it in your backyard, like pull out the young ones. I'm sad to say so, but like it doesn't make any sense to like some trees are just not meant to be here, and they're taking away from biodiversity and also ecological function. Yeah. So
what can people do to contribute to the health of Leeds Pond, or not do to contribute?
Stop applying chemicals. We all have this aesthetic, this thinking that it has to look like the perfect lawn. In the future, this will be like a laughing stock. Like your perfect lawn is going to be like, can you believe what they used to do? You know, they would flush the ground with chemicals and spend all this money and energy on like fossil fuel powered, the mowers and the blowers. Yeah. And it's just kind of ridiculous if you have an ecological sense. Because there's no way, whatever we apply to the ground will end up in the waterways, whether it's in our surface waters or groundwater, or eventually toxins will show up in our aquifers, in our bodies. So that's the number one key, is stop this chemical dependency and start celebrating diversity by planting natives. Even in my backyard, I have lacrosse playing kids, so they want the lawn, and that's fine, and we work with clover. We have a ground cover. I love plantains. They're not native, but they're really sturdy. Rabbits love the clover, actually, so it's really fun but you can work with ground cover. It doesn't have to be the perfect lawn. It can be green and biodiverse. I also think what we need to be doing is we need to be advocating for trees and planting trees in the right place. Joining a community, any of the groups here tonight, join as a volunteer. That's what you can do, to learn more and participate, because we're not doing this alone. There's so many people. Troop 71, I was talking to them tonight. There's a lot of all kinds of groups coming to Leeds Pond Preserve, to Sands Point Preserve with Climb, and you can participate in restoring health to the ecosystem and learn more and take that knowledge back to your home. And even free seedlings, we offer that as well.
And before I want to get to questions, because I know it's getting late. I did want to give a chance to some of our other partners to speak.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if Kim, you want to talk about what is the major problem at Baxter's Pond and how, I think there's a mic for you somewhere.
Here we go. Right here. Here you go, Kim.
Thank you so much. I won't take up a lot of time, but I will say that I appreciate the discussion of the fertilizer because, of course, fertilizer is running into Baxter's Pond as well. We also are a collection of water that comes from upstream and ends up in Baxter's Pond, and we want to make sure that water that then continues to Manhasset Bay is healthy for Manhasset Bay. Protecting Manhasset Bay is part of what Baxter's Pond is all about. But we also have a problem that you can see. You know, you don't see those fertilizers, but we have a problem of garbage in Baxter's Pond, and so that's something that's coming from upstream that we can actually see because the water that comes down Main Street and then flows down Central Drive and ends up in Baxter's Pond, it goes through our residential areas, it goes through Main Street, and it picks up the garbage that people put in overflowing garbage cans, that people put out to their curbs, and it ends up in Baxter's Pond. So I think there's, a few things that we can be thinking about. We have cleanups regularly, and you can come and participate in those cleanups, and they're a great time, and when they bring the community together, people bring their kids, lots of fun, and we try to pair those with environmental education activities or with planting. So those are great things. However, we shouldn't have to have so many cleanups, right? Because really it's an indication that there's some policy issues about the way that we're containing and collecting garbage in our town. And I think that's something that we really need to come together and think about. How can we be doing this better? How can we reduce the amount of garbage we're using by composting and using other methods? And also maybe there's some ways we should be doing this better. Do we really need to be putting out bags at the curb 3 times a week that can get caught in the wind and the rain? So these are things I think we need to be thinking about as a community, and I hope that the example that we have at Baxter's Pond will get people thinking about those. I don't know if Brady Bailey is still here. Is she?
I think she left.
Okay, so she's a high school student who did some work documenting the garbage that gathers in our catchment basin. It was really fascinating to see, but it's also really shows us what we're using too much of and putting too much of in garbage, plastic bottles, styrofoam, and other things. So and food for thought.
Yes, and back to the advocacy. Right now, New York State, they are very close to passing the Packaging Reduction and Recycling Act, Infrastructure Act, and it would greatly reduce the plastics and microplastics in our wilderness. Now, it's stuck in the assembly, so what everybody needs to do is call their assembly person and tell them how important it is, because it affects all of our nature, all of our ponds a lot. Raju, I want to give you a chance to talk about rewild and how people can get involved rewilding.
I see many familiar faces, so I know you all come out and do things. It's great to receive information, but nothing short of hands in the ground, dirty hands, cutting invasives, chopping all those porcelain berries that we're talking about. So really come out. Our youth are going to be out in full force, right? So I just want to point out, right? We have 60 students in the area who will be out there cutting invasives, planting natives, planting oysters in the bay, right? They will be out there composting. They will be out there growing food, which will be donated locally. So this time, for the first time, we are doing a little trial where we have some adult sign-up slots right next to it. And these are gorgeous places. You can go out to the UCSR and hang out with Agnes, or go to SMLI and hang out with Hilda, right? You're learning a lot. You're enjoying it. Bring your friends, family, and make it a social event. So that's great. This Saturday, there's a sustainable garden tour. So come out and see all the houses. As I say, find out the mistakes you can avoid before, you make them yourself. So, right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Raju. I want to open it up to the floor unless there's anything else you all want to add. One quick thing, yes.
I just wanted to say, if you don't like getting your hands dirty, we have a donate button. We
absolutely do.
We have an ecosystem restoration donation effort going on at the Science Museum of Long Island. Just one click and done.
So does anybody have any questions here in the audience? I totally agree.
I have two questions. A very quick one for David related to the very beginning of our presentations. I saw on the map there was something identifying a waste area or wastewater area, and it looked like it coincided with some of the territory of wildlife. And what does that mean, waste ground?
So it's a technical term for an area that's been highly degraded, but still has intact native vegetation. A great example is what was the address on West Shore Road where the condominium proposal?
145 West Shore Road.
145 West Shore Road, yes. It was a waste ground, predominantly gravel, roads. However, it had intact species all throughout.
Thank you. And then my other question, and I heard someone note it behind me, so I know I'm not the only one that was thinking it, but over to you. I was wondering, it does sound great, this restoration you're doing in the cliffs, but you noted and used the word many times, plastic, so that these reinforcing infrastructures are made of plastic. How do we prevent harm while doing good, right? Because aren't we concerned that now these plastics eventually are going to break down and become microplastics in our sound? I don't know. To me, it tweaks a little bit of a danger button.
Sure, I understand, and it's a good question. Well, it's first of all important to know that these are not permanent installations, that these plastic devices are temporary until the root systems of the plants take root. So they're usually in place for, well, in our experience, it was just over a year. And then they could be taken out and either reinstalled somewhere else or not used again. But the deterioration has been studied in terms of how they deteriorate and what they release into the environment. And we are looking into constructing these devices out of things other than plastics. There are a lot of challenges, obviously, in the development time, so I don't want to misrepresent that it's something that's going to be happening, but we're definitely, you're absolutely right. It's definitely a concern, but the fact that the seepage levels were as low as they were, so it's not like they were in any way at dangerous levels of contamination, has given us confidence that the technology works. But there's room for improvement, definitely. We've even looked into devices that wouldn't need to be removed, depending on what they were made of. If they dissolved and actually became some type of additive, positive, natural additive to the strata. So we are looking into those, and when I say we, it's really this company that we've partnered with. But we're mindful of what your concern. We share it, absolutely.
Okay, another question here.
This is not really a question so much as just a comment on the origin of all the time, love, commitment, ingenious solution finding that I see here in this room. And it was going to lead to a question, and I spent some time writing it and thinking about it. But I'm going to go back to David's mapping. And in 2012, you mapped the Port Washington Peninsula and discovered its crown jewel, is single-handedly exploring, analyzing, and most significantly mapping the biodiversity of the area now known as the Hempstead Harbor Woods. It was Port Washington's least known treasure, a heavenly biodiversity haven, self-protected from human invasion by, quote, poison ivy, rose thorns, remnant steep slopes from past sand mines, impenetrable topography, and a labyrinthine complex of hills, dense marsh, and open water. It was your own discovery of an area that had been hiding in plain sight since the Great Gatsby sandpits were abandoned. At that very same time, developers who were merely looking for an unclaimed spot on any local map were circling their wagons. They were planning and formally proposing to literally put up a parking lot and a diesel refueling spot there. That's what happened back in 2012. Your wetland map, David, and its true biodiversity assets became the keys to Port Washington community's protection of the heart of this vulnerable area the heart which your map identified as Serendipity Pond. In subsequent years, you worked with and brought together 8 local community organizations to advocate for the area's protection. It actually became a protected area in 2017 with the town's creation of a new Hempstead Harbor Woods.
Yes.
The next year, you founded Rewild Port Washington and the Port Washington Monarch Butterfly Alliance. In 22,
I want to interrupt you. I
yeah.
did read his bio. And
Okay,
and
okay.
David does amazing
Oh,
work.
okay.
So,
but I just, the only point I really wanted to make is that, David, your map has become all of our map.
that's true.
And that's what I wanted to say.
Yes, thank you, David. Thank you. Any other questions? And I'm sorry this has gone so late. We did get us started a little late. And then over there with Anne Marie.
I just have a quick point I want to make. First, I want to thank you all. This was an amazing panel. Thank you so much. If you're here tonight, I don't think I'm going too far out on a limb, pun intended, to say that this material is not completely foreign to us. We're interested in it. We're motivated by it. We want to sustain, our peninsula. I was lucky when I moved to Port Washington that Hilda was my first friend. So she taught me everything I know. Our neighbors and our friends don't know what they know. They don't know what you know. So sometimes we talk in our own echo chamber, and I just wanted to make the point that it is imperative to talk to our friends and talk to our neighbors. Talk to them about joining, or talk to them about simple things like not cutting down trees or not using fertilizer on lawns. It's really, really important. It feels very obvious to us, but it's not obvious to our friends and neighbors. So it's a really important thing that we all need to do.
And I think, thank
Thank you.
you. Anne
Okay, a
Marie.
hand over here. Yep.
From the time we moved here 30 years ago to Port Washington, our yard was filled with birds, frogs. We don't have that anymore. A lot of times when we're coming home on Plandome Road, Hilda, we have to stop at your preserve just to turn the car up and open the windows because it's such a beautiful bird song. So what I've done is I've removed so much of my lawn at home, gone back to planting natives, because when we moved there, I bought all these exotic plants that I thought were beautiful, and it's like, where are the birds? Nothing came. And that's when I hit upon Rewild and learned that they're not going to come for those kind of plants. So we've gone back to natives. I've transformed my front yard, taken up the lawn, into a pollinator garden, and I use that to educate my neighbors as they walk by. And I've encouraged them. Some have asked me for plants, and I share them and help them plant it in their front yard. So you can use your yards as examples and help spread, the information that way. But I wanted to ask, has any of your organizations used quails to fight ticks?
Quails, yes.
Quail.
The Hempstead Harbor.
I don't think it can actually. I mean, it's
The Hempstead Harbor Woods have
yes.
used it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the town raised quail and dispersed them at Hempstead Harbor Woods. Quail eat ticks, but let me tell you, ticks lay 400 to 600 eggs each. So you're going to need a lot of quail to eat all those ticks. And quail are they're not they don't fly that well. So I think the fox ate most of them. Fox.
The house cat.
Oh, and house cats, but I haven't seen any house cats at Hempstead Harbor Woods.
They don't venture
I
that
think
far.
the coyote eat them.
There is a feral cat colony.
So I think I'm going to have to wrap this up now before we get kicked out of the library. But that
can I
last
say-
point, and then yes.
So Anne Marie's front lawn is purple part of the year. It's amazing. The flocks, right? It's so
It's an
beautiful.
inspiration.
No watering.
So this has been an incredible evening, and I want to thank all of you for sharing your passion, your expertise, and your stories from the field. What?
Was there any more questions?
Oh, one more question.
We have
okay.
one more question here. I
Can
think
you
it's
keep
related to.
keep the doors open for a moment.
We got one more question, then we'll wrap it up.
Okay.
Short sentence. When I was raised in Port Washington, in the mid-'60s, there were possums everywhere. I used to walk through the Hempstead Harbor Woods to and from Salem School to Schreiber and back. Well, now I didn't get ticks back then. Every time I walk the trail, which we were discussing, there are live ticks on me, even though I coat myself with DEET, which I don't like to do. But a possum is known to eat 10,000 ticks a year. Is there any chance of encouraging the original possum population to stop this abundance of ticks, which I never saw?
You can contact the town and ask them to raise raise possums and let them loose in Hempstead Harbor Woods. Individuals can also raise possum
And I just just one just final comment. There used to be starfish. Now, if you go to the beach, yes, and I hear that. I wasn't here, but thousands of starfish. So what we've done to this ecosystem in a short time, in a lifetime, is really tragic, and we should be thinking about getting it back, and something just very daring, maybe food for thought next time we meet. It's been so, I wish I could engage the audience more, so next time maybe we can plan on that. But marine protected areas. So something to think about is like having parts of the bay motorboat free, like this human centered way of living here is really affecting the wildlife, as you stated in your.
Well, there were many wooden barges that were, abandoned and rotting. They were ultimate wildlife habitats,
Right.
Fish, crabs, all that stuff. And I think the county might have done it, or the town, they dredged all of that out.
And I think next time, I hope you join us next time. There will be a next
Yes,
time.
and I was just going to say, we spent, all this time talking to only 3 of our members' organizations, and we could spend probably several more nights talking to all the rest of the member organizations. And all the work that everyone is doing is really incredible, and all these efforts contribute to a larger vision of connected, thriving ecosystems. And we're just at the beginning of this work. We invite you all to get involved, volunteer. There's tons of volunteer opportunities between all our organizations. Advocate for policy, rewild your backyard, and support our work and donations and everything else. And I just want to say thank you to everyone here and for your good work. And thank you to the Port Washington Public Library.
Thank you. Thank you very much.